Welcome, everyone. My name is Jacob. Thank you for joining me. This is Hunt Detail. Hope you are having a great summer as we get further and further into July and closer to the hunting seasons. I'm very excited, obviously, and it's just and as we move forward into this summer and then into fall, there's the Total Archery Challenge, which may or may not be coming near you. The Full Draw Film Tour is out there touring right now, and there's also some Mobile Hunter Expo, the whole Mobile Hunter Expo, and the Mobile Hunter Roadshow. And I thought I'd share some of those dates. I have no affiliation with either of them. I went to the very first Mobile Hunter Expo a couple years ago and really enjoyed it. And I plan on going to the one in Ohio this year. And certainly, if you see me, stop, grab me, say, hey, I'd love to chat, love to connect with you. I'm excited about it. It's always nice to interact with folks that love the same things, that are passionate, deeply passionate about the same things that you're passionate about. And I find that when I go to the ATA a lot of times, and then when I've gone to the Mobile Hunter Expo or other events, it's just really nice. And so the Mobile Hunter Expo looks like the first one is in Dalton, Georgia. That's August 8th, 9th, and 10th. And the other one is in Wilmington, Ohio, August 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And like I said, if those are anywhere near you, I'm going to drive up to the Wilmington, Ohio one. I'm a few hours away, but I really enjoy those events, and it's just great to connect with the brands and meet people, connect with people that are like-minded. And so the Mobile Hunter Roadshow, which this is more of a lone wolf custom gear event. Mobile Hunters Expo is sort of a conglomeration of a bunch of different brands. So I would encourage you to check out the website. But the Roadshow is in Dahlonega, Georgia, August 2nd, Salineville, Ohio, August 9th, Stanton, Virginia, August 16th, and then at the Lone Wolf Custom Gear HQ in Bellevue, Iowa on August 23rd. And obviously, I've never been to any of those, but that I'm sure that would be interesting and exciting. And I know they have a lot of speakers lined up for both, the expo and the road show. But really exciting time of year. Today, I thought I would go. I got some questions on public land whitetail hunting and scouting, and I thought I'd go through some of those questions. And again, a lot of the way that I answer the questions is really as if I were talking to answering the questions for myself for 15 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, as I've evolved in the way that I hunt. So again, it's not that I'm some sort of expert. Obviously, the folks that you have, at these expos and the road shows, those are obviously the guys you should be listening to. I am just a guy, but ultimately, I try to answer these questions in the way that I would have answered them, or if the version of myself, from several years ago was asking them. Before we get to that, BJ is this week's winner. I'm sorry, winner of the sample pack from Relight sample pack, and it's a six pack of individual flavored electrolyte mixes. And Relight has zero sugar. It's great additive to your water. It's made by Redmond, and Redmond's makes salt and seasonings. And this stuff is mined out of an ancient seabed in Utah. And if you use the code DETAIL, you get 15% off. And if you message me the word DETAIL via Instagram, just message me the word, you're entered, and you could get a 6-pack of the sample pack. And even if you don't get drawn, you're gonna get something. I'm gonna send you some stickers a single stick of the Relight. I'll send you that as well, even if you don't get drawn for the 6-pack sample pack. So go ahead and do that now. Go to the Instagram, find Hunt Detail, message me the word detail, and you're entered. So congratulations, BJ. Also, if you go to rawrev.com and use the word detail, you're going to save 20% on your first order of the Raw Rev bars. They have they're protein bars, high protein, low sugar. They're perfect for the tree stand or the saddle, or if you're going on a Western hunt, they're fantastic. And so that's that. So I wanted to, like I said, I'm going to get into some of these questions. And before I did, actually, I was thinking of this recently. So I'm doing some work on my deck, and it's been overdue. I'm replacing all of the boards. Some of them had rotted through. I had to replace some a couple years ago. There's a lot of they just degraded. The house I live in is over 15 years old, and it's time to make some changes there. And I am replacing all of those boards with the Trex stuff. And I've not ever done this before as a project, but it's taking on, it's a huge amount of time. And I have spent as much, if not more time visualizing and working through the mathematics of it and trying to understand how much materials do I need, how much, what tools do I need, what do I want it to look like in the end. I'm trying to, I could be very haphazard, and just make mistakes along the way, but it would be costly in terms of time and money. And so I have spent an inordinate amount of time visualizing what I want this to look like. And I thought I'd sort of share that because I think when you hear from athletes or anybody talking about particular objectives, they talk a lot about visualization. And I think it is also holds true for hunting, and it's holds true for when we're trying to find the right tree, when we're trying to understand terrain, when we do get set up and you try to play out the scenarios that can transpire. And I tend to do that a lot when when I get set up, or before I even set up. I'm trying to visualize, okay, these are my shot windows. This is 25, this is 20, this is 30, maybe this is 35. I've got to watch out for this. I've got to think about this. With the predominant wind is this. And I think if you're not doing that sort of thing in the woods, that visualization dynamic, because last week I talked about how important access was. I think access is the cornerstone of a successful hunt. But I think visualization is also an important aspect of it, because things happen so fast. Early season, it's so there's so much green up. You could see something coming through, but you're catching glimpses of antler. You don't know if it's the target buck or not, if it's a shooter or not. You're trying to put pieces together within seconds, within milliseconds. And then in the fall, if it's the rut, it's the sort of the same thing. It's the same thing, but it's they're moving. They're not stopping. It's chasing. They're moving quickly through the woods, and you're like, your shot windows is there, and then it's gone, and there, and it's gone, so I think that visualization piece is really critical. It's something that I've gotten better at over the years, and it's certainly played a role in one of the bucks I killed this year, where he was 50 yards away. He had used a trail that a group of does had just come up, or had come up a little bit earlier, and he got to a point where he couldn't see me and I couldn't see him, and I grunted. And I did that on purpose because I saw him 50 yards away. He could have, if I grunted when I initially saw him, he could have whipped his head around and saw me, or figured something was up. But I waited till he got up above me, grunted, and it just so happened I had some does underneath me. They busted out of there, but I had already uh, range got the range for a couple different windows, and so I let out a couple of really deep grunts. He started to work his way down, and I could see him coming down, and I put it away when he got to a point where he committed, and then he stood there, waited, and then he finally came all the way, and then he got to a point where I had ranged it at 30, and I shot, and it was interesting is that I had to literally whisper to myself, 30, 30, like, because I've done it before where I'll shoot using my top pin just without even thinking. And I'm not saying that that was a perfect visualization, but it was one of those scenarios where I was like, okay, if I got, this is my window, this is ranged, this is 30. And sure enough, it was 30. I hit him perfect, pinwheeled him. It was a great experience, a great shot. But again, I think there are times where I don't I don't do that enough. I'm not doing it enough, or I'm not having that intentionality around it. And when you don't play that out, I mean, I had a couple other scenarios last year where I didn't do that well, and it cost me. So, food for thought as we get closer to the season. So let's look at let's answer some of these questions. So one of the questions that I got was, how do I locate overlooked spots that others miss? And this is a really good question because I think this applies for, I mean, whitetail. I'm going out west to hunt mule deer this year as well. And and that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is identify spots that might be overlooked. Uh, so I think what I have done is I look at areas where there's no parking lot or there's no spot to park. And I think that's a place to start, where you're like, okay, the people pressure, I mean, people look for a spot to park. And if you decide that, well, I'm going to be a little bit more creative, and maybe you park where you're supposed to park, but you take a different route, and that's where you could ostensibly hunt near the road because it's an area that isn't getting pressure from a traditional sense. The pressure's coming in from a certain area, and you say work a mile, half mile, 3/4 mile down the way, and then cut up and in. Or I think I talked a little bit about last week, is using a creek system or having to cross water, looking at a ridge system that's super steep, and so steep that some folks aren't ever, probably aren't going to go up it. I think those are ways to find overlooked spots. Um, if you do some e-scouting and you look at where the traditional parking spots are, or trailheads, and then sort of draw a large circle, let's say a mile to 2 mile circle around those spots, it will start to reveal to you the spots that might not have as much pressure. And it's like, oh, okay, there's a gap here, or there's a gap over here that is likely overlooked, or even edges of private and public. Obviously, you don't want to create a scenario where you shoot something and it goes into private, but you can look at it from the perspective of, okay, I could hunt this area. It's very close to a piece of private, and maybe it's an area that a lot of people don't hunt near because they don't want to deal with private pressure or borders or anything like that. And so those are some thoughts that come off off the cuff. Um, the other thing, as it relates to overlooked spots, I would say is understanding the terrain. There was an area that was logged a number of years ago, and this whole swath, this whole cut, is now so thick that I don't think that deer can get through it easily, and certainly not people. And but if you look on the edges of that, I've had some luck hunting an area where it would ostensibly push deer to get around that thick cover. That thick cut. Not always work. It hasn't always worked, but it did. I did have some encounters that were encouraging, and there are some areas like that, and the spot is actually near a busy highway that, again, I don't think people access this piece of public the way that I'm accessing it. What food sources should I key in on for public land? I mean, I think early season, it really is. I mean, we talked about the diversity of browse along creek systems. I couldn't tell you the exact types of browse, quite honestly, but I think when it comes to early season, I think for me, it's a lot of white oaks and just understanding which oak flat is hot, because you and it's all very seasonal. When white oaks have sort of sort of a bumper crop, or if they're dropping, it can rotate year to year, so it might not be the same oak flat every year. And the same thing with red oaks, but I would say red oaks are something I would focus on later in the season. But I think for early season, it's a maybe that diversity of browse, and then trying to combine it with the white oak trees that are dropping, that are hot, and you can really tell by the way the ground is tore up. If you I think that would be my primary key from a food source standpoint. And I do have a video on the Hunt Detail YouTube channel on finding or understanding white oaks, red oaks, and even within white oaks, which are what are your swamp oak, your pin oak, your that sort of thing. It's very detailed in terms of the leaf and the bark and the acorn top, if it's bumpy or scaly. How do I get deer out of remote locations alone? Okay, that's a good question. So I think what they're trying to ask is, if you if you shoot something, how do you get it out if you're pretty far back there? I would say understand how to break it down. And if you don't have a lot of experience with gutting whitetail or whatever, I mean, you can get a deer card, but I think a lot of people are now starting to quarter their deer, and pack it out. And so there's a lot of videos on that in terms of how to quarter something. It's sort of like the gutless method if you were hunting elk, where you're basically cutting along the spine, skinning it down, taking off the hind quarters, the front quarters, the back straps, some rib meat, the neck meat, and then the head. And if you may want to take the heart and the liver, um, and then taking a set of like 5 game bags. I would say roughly five, because you probably could put a front and a hind in a game bag, a front and a hind in another one, or you could separate them out. But something of that nature, you'd have some game bags, and then you would want to have a way to attach it to your pack, or or some way to get it out. Um, I would say, yeah, I mean, you could probably just work with even sort of fitting it in some sort of, I'm trying to think about it out loud, but I will tell you that Tethered came out this year with a pack that the intent is to help you to pack your whitetail out. It's a frame pack, and I thought it was very reasonably priced. I saw it at ATA. I have a video of it on the Hunt Detail YouTube channel, and I can't remember the exact price, but I want to say it was in like the mid 200s, and it was I thought, very well thought out, and it's a small frame pack, and you could. Now I have a frame pack that I use for elk hunting, and sometimes I will pack that. I'll put that in my car and leave it if in case I want to do that, if I want to break a whitetail down, and so the frame pack that I have would allow me to carry a bag, or I can put like a meat sling on the back of it. But great question, and I would encourage you to check out that tethered pack that they came out with at ATA this year. And again, I think it's in the mid 200s from a price standpoint, and it might be something to invest in if you're going to be packing out whitetails, or even like even if you're going to be using it for other like smaller game like pronghorn or mule deer. How do wind and thermals play out differently in big public land terrain? So this is something I learned about years ago when I first started elk hunting. I guess it was like in 2017, 2018. And as the sun rises, the air warms, and as the air warms, it's rising. So if you think about in the mornings, air is sort of falling. It's cool. It's at the lowest point in the bottoms, and then as the sun warms and hits that, so the sun's rising in the east, and it's more south than north. So if, like, say it's a southeast facing ridge, that air is going to warm up and it's going to rise. So if we have a predominant wind, let's say, I don't know, let's say the wind's coming out of the north, and then we have air rising out of the south, then you have sort of this confluence of wind and thermals hitting together at some point. Um, so then it's the inverse happens in the evening, is as the air cools, the sun is setting in the west. As that air cools, it starts to fall. So if you can think about, right, like say the last 45 minutes before sunset, you've got air is cooling, it's falling, and if you're at the top of the ridge, then your scent ostensibly is going to drop to the bottom of that ridge system, or the bottoms. So you may want to consider, you really want to start thinking about how you want to set up using thermals and the predominant wind to your advantage. So, but that's a really good question. There's a lot of videos on that, and I would say, just think about it as things, as temperature rises, things are rising up. As the temperature falls, things are falling. How to identify bedding areas, or buck bedding areas on public land? So that's a good question. I think when I find bedding, if there's a couple things that I'm looking for. I mean, you want to think about what the wind is doing, what the thermals are doing, how whatever's bedded there might be using that bed. What can they see from that bed? And if you have multiple beds around, sort of facing in different directions, then that's going to be probably a bunch of doe bedding. Especially, I think, if it's at the very tip top of a ridge, my experience, a doe group will bed on the very top, and you'll have does facing all different sorts of directions. Where if it's a buck, as a lone buck, they might be bedded a little bit down from the top of the ridge. They may have something at their back. They may have a a view of an area. It may be based on some of the thermals and the wind direction. And I think that, there are there's probably other sign around that's going to tell you if it's a buck bed. You may see uh, a rub or two or more. And so how do you find them? I think, a lot of my experiences on hill country, but even in areas that I would consider sort of flat, you still have rises and little more subtle terrain changes, uh, subtle hills and whatnot. And I think the same holds true there, where they might bed up a little higher so they can see and have sort of the wind to their advantage, that sort of thing. But I think, um, oh gosh, who is it? The hunting beast, Dan Infold, has said this before. Like, if you were being hunted, think about how the terrain would impact the way you would move, or how you would bed, or how you would set up to protect yourself. And I thought that's obviously a really good insight, just to think about. So in terms of identifying bedding or finding beds, I would think of, how would the terrain help you or that buck stay safe and stay at, use the terrain to their advantage. Is it worth hunting the same stand more than once on public? Absolutely, I think. I mean, it depends on a bunch of factors. I mean, if you have it depends on the access. It also depends on if there is a lot of pressure. But if you feel like the sign and is telling you to hunt there, then I think you should. And I think if your access though is bad and you're leaving a lot of ground scent and maybe you have a bad wind, then then you may want to give that spot a break. But there have been lots of times where I've hunted a spot over and over, but um, with my access, knowing that my access was great and that I wasn't really going to blow anything up or bust anything up, and then and my wind was always sort of in my face, or not in a direction where I'm messing, leaving a giant, jumping a bunch of deer, or leaving a big scent cone. Yeah, okay. And here's the last question: is it worth hunting the same stand more than once? Yeah, I did sort of answer that. I think the great thing about being mobile, though, is that you don't have to. And and we started talking now about the Mobile Hunters Expo. I mean, it's a perfect place to go to learn more about products that'll help you stay mobile, and that way you don't have to feel like you have to go back to the same spot. I remember a time where I would have a stand and I might leave it overnight because I just didn't want to pack it out, and I didn't want to, and I would just go back to sit that same spot, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't a hot area. And so I just liked it because of the terrain layout, but there wasn't enough sign there. The woods was not telling me to hunt there. And so the good news is that if you do hunt an area and you find out it's cold, you can bounce around in that region and fine tune your setup and figure out where the movement primarily is. So thank you all for listening. Appreciate your support. Please follow me at the Hunt Detail. Go to Instagram, message me the word detail. We'll talk again next week. Thanks again.